Humans have been building monumental religious structures for thousands of years. You have the Parthenon, the huge Greek temple atop the Acropolis in Athens, completed in 438 BCE. You have the Great Ziggurat of Ur, built by the Sumerians around 2000 BCE. And you have Stonehenge, which dates as early as 3000 BCE. But 400, 2000, and 3000 BCE are nothing compared to what is possibly the oldest religious structure ever found, Göbekli Tepe, which dates as early as 9100 BCE. That is 11,000 years old, and 6,500 years before the pyramids of Giza. The YouTuber Kurzgesagt mentioned this site in a recent video without going into much detail, but this site is worth knowing. What was Göbekli Tepe used for, and what can it tell us about our Neolithic ancestors? Göbekli Tepe is located in southeast Turkey near the Syrian border. Archaeologists first noted its existence in 1963, but no one excavated the site until the 1990s, and in a short period of time it transformed our understanding of Neolithic culture in Anatolia. What they discovered was a hilltop sanctuary consisting of bunches of T-shaped pillars carved out of limestone and arranged in several circular enclosures. We have found 8 of these enclosures, but surveys of the surrounding area have revealed that there may be as many as 20. And these pillars are gigantic, measuring as tall as 7 meters and weighing upwards to 10 metric tons. We are obviously dealing with a construction project of immense planning and cooperation, at a level that we didn't even think was possible for Neolithic communities. Because what is so amazing about this site is just how old it is. I can't even stress that enough. Archaeologists have dated this site to what is called the Pre-Pottery Neolithic A period. So that is the Pre-Pottery Neolithic era. This site was built even before people in the Middle East were making pottery, one of our most ancient technologies, let alone before the invention of iron tools. They quarried these pillars with stone axes and wooden levers and transported them hundreds of feet, possibly without the help of draft animals. So how do we know that this site is so old? Well, it's based on several threads of evidence. The first bit of evidence that this site dates to the pre-pottery Neolithic era is, you guessed it, archaeologists found no pottery. Pottery is one of the main pieces of evidence that archaeologists of the Middle East region rely on for dating a site. So the absence of ceramics is the first red flag that we are dealing with a very ancient site. But even more conclusive, instead of pottery, archaeologists did find Neolithic tools such as flint projectile points at the site. And finally, radiocarbon dating corroborates these findings. The wall plaster from the circular enclosures has bits of organic material inside of it, so you can test the wall plaster to find out when it was made. So after the archaeologists conducted radiocarbon dating on the wall plaster and bits of charcoal, they found that the site was probably built around the 10th millennium or 9th millennium BCE. If you want an in-depth and very technical analysis of these findings, I'm posting a link from the excavation research staff in the description below. But why did our Neolithic ancestors spend so much time and energy to build such a massive complex? Archaeologists have long thought that Göbekli Tepe is some sort of religious sanctuary, even going so far as to call it a temple. Now we'll go through some of the evidence for this, but we'll also hear from some archaeologists that don't think temple is the best word to describe this site. So what is the evidence that we are dealing with a religious site? First of all, the pillars are covered in symbolic imagery. The pillars are anthropomorphic. Whoever built them carved hands onto the sides that stretched down to loincloth-like clothing. The archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who led the excavations of Göbekli Tepe from 1996 until his death in 2014, speculated that this represents some sort of religious ritual, maybe a gathering of priests or gods, or some sort of circle dance. Moreover, some of the pillars bear animals, many of them predatory and threatening animals like foxes and scorpions that may have been seen as supernaturally protective images, kind of like how ancient Greeks portrayed frightening images of Medusa on buildings to protect the site from harm. Now, there is no doubt that this building had symbolic importance to the people that built it, but we have to ask how it was used. Can we really say that religious rituals were being performed in this site? Well, it seems that these pillar enclosures were built to facilitate communal gatherings. Connecting these pillars were walls and benches that might indicate that people gathered here. Moreover, there is possible but inconclusive evidence that people were feasting together, even brewing beer. Archaeologists found stone vessels throughout the site. Due to their size and capacities of up to 160 liters, they are an integral part of particular rooms. Residue analysis of these artifacts suggests that they were used for the production of malt and beer. Now, of course, this is inconclusive evidence, but religions throughout human history have often incorporated some form of communal ritual dining. So when we consider that people may have been brewing beer here together and eating gazelles and cattle all within a symbolically charged circular enclosure, we might also be dealing with symbolically charged feasting. Schmidt theorizes that religion in the pre-pottery Neolithic period was more complex than we had originally thought, and that this site might have been some sort of trans-regional sacred site that people from all over the region traveled to, like some sort of pilgrimage site. However, we would be remiss not to talk about other theories. A lot of Schmidt's colleagues do not agree with him. A lot of our assumptions of what should be considered a religious building are colored by our modern understandings of religion. For example, what do you think about when you hear the word temple? You might think of a big building, big buildings dedicated to specific gods or that were sacred sites, sites that were set apart from the mundane daily life of ordinary people. But we know so little about Neolithic religion that using this term temple might actually be wildly inaccurate. Anthropologist E.B. Banning, for example, is highly skeptical that we should call Göbekli Tepe a temple. In a recent rebuttal of Schmidt's theory, Banning argues that Göbekli Tepe was a residential complex, albeit a residential complex that was probably used for religious ritual. The very distinction between temple and house may well be inappropriate in some pre-pottery Neolithic contexts, and that the possibility that symbolically charged structures, including those at Göbekli Tepe, were both ritual and domestic spaces deserves attention as an alternative hypothesis. He first of all argues that these pillar enclosures might have had a roof, which would have made them much more suitable dwelling places. Moreover, he points out that the symbolism, like anthropomorphic pillars and animals, doesn't automatically preclude the theory that people lived in these buildings. Residential buildings in the pre-pottery Neolithic era may well be considered religious sites, buildings that were deeply imbued with cosmological significance, and where people conducted all manners of religious rituals, whether they were burying their ancestors under the floors or putting magical spells in their walls. The label of temple may therefore be way too anachronistic, and we shouldn't describe Göbekli Tepe as some sort of sacred site or pilgrimage. Nevertheless, whether we are dealing with a temple, a shrine, or a collection of residences, even E.B. Banning agrees that we are dealing with a site that hosted some sort of religious rituals, ranging from feasting to funeral rites or maybe even magical rituals. But no matter how we classify this site, Göbekli Tepe marks a watershed moment in our species' history, a moment in time when we were increasingly shifting from living in bands of nomadic foragers to living in sedentary communities focused on food production and animal husbandry. Göbekli Tepe is a product of technological advances and changes in social structures that allowed for greater population densities, more complex social hierarchies to coordinate these populations, and advances in food production to feed these populations. Göbekli Tepe therefore stands at the dawn of a new age for humanity, and the very same social factors that gave rise to this monolithic site may have also contributed to the rise of organized religion itself. Eventually, though, Göbekli Tepe was abandoned. Those using the site gradually and intentionally filled the site with dirt, constructing less impressive buildings on top of the original site, and eventually leaving it abandoned for 11,500 years until Dr. Klaus Schmidt dug it up in the late 20th century. But we ultimately do not know why these pillar enclosures were built, what these animals were supposed to represent, and what rituals may have occurred here. But what we do know is that humanity's predilection for building massive, symbolically charged buildings started very early in our species' history, and that our tendency to participate in communal rituals predates our invention of pottery, writing, and even metallurgy. Göbekli Tepe endures as a testament not only to these people's tenacity and technological skill, but also to the durability of certain religious rituals. Rituals like communal feasting that were practiced 11,000 years ago, but persist even to this day in houses of worship all over the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Special thanks to my friend and colleague Nick Schmuck for his archaeological expertise while I was developing this episode. If you would like to join my mission to bring quality content about religious studies onto YouTube, please consider becoming a patron over at my Patreon campaign. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.